Well, here we find ourselves, Zell. Episode 3. What do you think?
I think it's awesome. I think I'm excited for episode 3.
I am excited for episode 3 too, and it's so funny. I mean, Zell and I on Monday night were chatting about a future topic for the podcast, and we were like, "Yeah, we'll just kind of put that on jam and whip that out," and then we both kind of dove into the topic, and to Zell's credit, him much more than I, and I think we've both come back and kind of had a discussion about it. We're like, "Yeah, that's going to be a little deeper dive." That's something we're going to be doing in the future. So, kind of excited about it though. But with that being said, I think it's still going to be a great show tonight.
Well, it's something that we definitely need to probably talk about every month. It's something that I believe a lot of people, either they didn't read it or catch it, but the roadmap, talking about the roadmap and how that's going to impact us in the game.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, without further ado, we'll kind of discuss that current roadmap update. I think, there was a roadmap update today. It was actually, today is, 6/8, at least for another hour and a half here. And at 1 o'clock today on 6/8, the Roadmap Roundup came up. And we're not necessarily going to, kind of go over it in infinite detail, but we're definitely going to hit on the major topics, and there's a couple of things, to discuss with it. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and just kind of dive on in. So one of the first things they mentioned is they actually decided to kind of split up the derelict reclaimer settlement as a point of interest. And the derelict reclaimer space mission. So it looks like a couple different teams were assigned those, and that makes sense. Obviously designing a POI versus maybe something that has a little more in-depth, kind of conversation, and I'm sure it involves the player character teams and some of that other stuff. If there's going to be maybe a mission giver for some of that stuff, you can imagine that those aren't the same teams usually.
Now, I believe a lot of that actually is to be set up for missions, not as much point of interests or kind of loot diving, but more of mission specific.
Yeah, and that's what they basically say here.
Yeah.
There's this point of interest. It's been split into two distinct cards. Due to the development work being significantly different for each, right? So, they do want to have, of course, your POI that you land with. If they're going to be doing some mission wrap around that, that's a little deeper dive. It's probably going to be a different team for sure.
Oh, well, we could talk about point of interest for a long time. Those are actually, they're really ramping that up with the Mighty Bridge. These guys from Montreal are really putting out the content. And as it relates to Stanton, I mean, we have a lot of things that people don't realize. It's amazing the amount of different little explorable places you can go to. But these guys are just cranking it out, and I'm glad to see it. By the time Pyro hits, we'll have a lot more expansion as it relates to things to go see and do inside Stanton alone. These new tools are allowing them to really expand that out at a pretty quick pace. Even, not to get off topic, but like these Lagrange points, they're cranking them out pretty quick. If you'd seen some of those videos that the Montreal team had of, building a space station from scratch, I mean, they were whipping that thing out fast. So
that's crazy.
I expect to see a lot more, even before Pyro.
And I knew the derelicts had come, or more derelicts had been introduced in 3.17, but it still didn't stop me from being incredibly stunned. I think of course, I spend a little time on Lyria. This probably comes as no surprise to anybody who knows what I do in the game. I think it was, I hit SAL5, and I don't know, I just kind of took off from there and was kind of headed in a direction. And at some point, I just, I wasn't far away from it, and I just, all of a sudden, I flew over. I'm like, what was that on the ground? And I pivoted back and headed back over. It's a cat. It was a cat derelict on the ground there. And I just was, there's something incredibly cool about that, just the feeling you get when you're kind of cruising over the planet's surface. And like I said, I knew the derelicts were there. I just happened to stumble across it randomly. I hadn't gone and looked at where the coordinates were or where they were. It was an organic thing that happened at the moment. And it was just like, and then I was faced with these decisions, it's like, well, do I go down there? It's like, well, I only have my sidearm, do I have extra, anything medical with me? Of course I always have my base kit with me, but I decided ultimately not to actually, to not really to go in it, you know what I mean? Because I figured I'll end up probably getting, if there's anybody down there, I may end up, in a battle. But, it was, the fires that they had going, the broken pieces kind of scattered in the fires. I'll tell you mine. Yeah, it was great.
I'll tell you my experience. What makes it really cool, because I'm a dark side miner. I always like to mine on the dark side a lot. So you're just cruising along, just doing your thing, just scanning and looking, and next thing you know, you see this fire in the distance, and the wreck spread over a pretty large area. And then once you land, you're like, holy cow, this is this is a huge area. But seeing that fire from space, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that scale, I mean, and we've spoken to that a couple of times. And if you ever just happen to, if you're prospector mining and you're Quantanium mining, in particular, and when you get out and let's say you have to put one of those mining gadgets on a rock, and you don't really have a perspective on that scale till you land that ship and get out of it and go look at the size of that rock, it will blow your mind. They just don't seem that large, I mean, and so I agree 100%. I mean, when you kind of get down on the ground and begin looking at that stuff, the game is insanely huge. I mean, and
it really is. We mine thousands of rocks, and every time that we stop to to mark a point or whatever, you're waiting for somebody to to come back with dropping off a load, and you get out and you're looking, wow, how much bigger this rock is than my prospect. that just shows you the scale. And we've all been around a caterpillar. I mean, we know it's pretty good size, but it's amazing when you start putting things in this context of exploring them. You're exploring those segments, and you're crawling through them, you're jumping up on platforms, you're jumping on crates, you're trying to squeeze through doors, and it takes a couple hours to fully explore one little caterpillar. I say little, but it just goes to show you don't realize the space and the size. It just, when you stop to think about it, you're like, wow, I spent a lot of time in there. Because, I'm a loot whore, man, so I'm kind of a completionist.
Yeah, no, sure I totally
understand. I found everything. So I'm fine-tooth combing stuff. And you're just like, wow. With all the puzzles, that was something I believe was pretty awesome. And, they're going to be expanding upon that a little bit, but doing these puzzles, the jumping puzzle, those were always my favorite out of any game. The exploration, the little jumping puzzles. It's the
parkour
problem
stuff,
solving. Yeah.
No, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. And I mean, and of course, when you have kind of a tractor beam at your side, and I mean that makes it a lot funner as well. And I will say, two of the coolest feelings, I mentioned kind of that ground thing. There's also when you find a space derelict, and you happen to kind of, you're on one of those missions where you got to kind of identify the bodies for the family or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really do get a sense of. I mean, it's a it's a scary. Like I wouldn't not sure scary is the right word, but it's definitely intense. It's intense when you're looking around and all of a sudden, it's very quiet and you just hear your guy breathing and then you kind of round a corner and there's a guy floating there. It's like, oh, brutal. That's just it's a crazy thing. So yeah, the derelicts are. These are just one of the other many layers that just kind of bring life to Stanton, and so it is really exciting that they're kind of starting to expand in the different ship types. Of course, the reclaimer ones are going to be enormous too, coming up. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
That's going to be crazy fun.
Yep.
Going, up into those guys is going to be pretty amazing.
So here they say on the roadmap, just so we don't pivot off too far, a variety of handcrafted, narratively unique missions that have been created for the new derelict reclaimer wreck sites in space. I mean, a variety of handcrafted, narratively unique missions. That's actually, this feature has been added to Alpha 3.17 column and is targeted for delivery in Q2 at 317.2. So not long from now, a couple weeks really, 2-3 weeks I think from now, 317.2. So you're going to have some missions that are driven off of these derelict reclaimers, and I honestly think that's just going to be fantastic. Just another fun thing to go and do.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. Did they? All right, let's get through this. There's going to be a lot of different. There's going to be a 600i.
Yeah.
They're going to be the MSR. There's going to be quite a bit of those crash sites, and at some point, I believe a lot of those are going to be more interactable than they are now.
I would imagine there's going to be maybe some salvage crossover in some capacities with them. I mean, potentially.
Well, I was thinking, I guess this is where we kind of look at that, right? Where, are these points of interest or these, mission locations? Because that's where a lot of this meshing's coming into play for the AI,
right?
Around these derelicts. How much of that is going to be salvageable, and how much of those are going to just be hard points? Are they going to differentiate? Well, I mean, they are going to differentiate, but what amount of differentiation between those points and say actual, salvageable areas are going to be? Am I going to be able to get my oxy cutter and, start cutting holes in these derelicts? And, and if that's the case, then, how's that going to work for the next guy? Is it kind of based on a kind of the way things are now?
Well, they've talked about this time lapse.
A lot of different other games,
the kind of this time lapse meta, right, where they kind of get older. So you're absolutely raising an excellent point. Like maybe there's going to be some derelicts that are fresh. I mean, it crashed like a week ago, and there's still no one's found it yet, and there's still things in it. You know what I mean? Like when they first generate, maybe they'll have components in them that people will loot those, and they'll be gone, and then other people will come and like you said, cut holes in different spots looking, and those will persist. I mean, maybe potentially persist. Until basically it's there's not a whole lot there. It's just kind of like a husk that just kind of rusts out.
Well,
very interesting.
And then I guess you kind of think of it this way, right? Because you want to have those experiences for everybody. So you got to think of the rarity value. Are these going to be locked in a certain location where it's like, oh yeah, that's where that wreck is, and we can go have our salvage gameplay because we know where it is, and then we have a point for it, so we can go find it? Or is it going to be procedurally generated where something that I was looking at earlier was something that was on the roadmap a while back that's starting to come back was that's on the on May's roundup for May was the new scanning and how they're gonna all the new different scanning techniques that they're going to be implementing, whether it be FPS or whatever, and they're going to be based on your gameplay. So when you go scan for salvage, is it something that you can ping out into a location? Is it going to be mission driven where they'll be procedurally generated from a mission? Like you have that mission, it's like, oh, go to this location, you know, such and such heard that there was a crashed reclaimer at XYZ, and you go out there and then do your gameplay. Or are these going to be, you know, something that spawns up out in the verse where you come across them, you know, scan for them, and you go, oh, I got a ping. It's, you know, so many, how far out scanning is going to be at that particular time. It's like, oh, I think we found a wreck, and then you go out and salvage it. So
yeah, it's a very good point. And I mean, just to throw kind of an interesting thought on the fire. I mean, people crash ships all the time. You know what if what if you actually you just crash a ship, and that's just the it just kind of marks it and just says, hey, we'll spin one of the we'll spin up this it will be kind of a mission that will get spun up out of this. You know what I mean? And maybe, obviously at that time, if you're standing there, you may not necessarily have a derelict, but like, a week later, it's like, hey, there was a crash here in this area, and there was this type of ship or that type of thing. Very interesting thoughts, how it, and I think you're actually, raising a really good point, the scarcity of them, as well as, when you were saying, hard points, like, because you're absolutely right. If they're putting tech into this AI planetary navigation, and they're going to have AI walking around these particular things,
yeah, conceivably AI that the whole point of the quanta,
yep,
being physicalized, so these the AI pirates blowing down some sort of transport ship and causing wreckage, or a huge AI battle with the advocacy or any of the other security groups in Stanton, causing a lot of wreckage, a lot of ships,
well,
usually in those spots above the planetary bodies. So all that, man,
you and I have talked about that dream.
It has
right?
so much potential, and it can go 100 different ways.
You and I have talked about that dream where you kind of roll up on like there'd been some kind of maybe a medium or large scale battle, and there's a lot of just kind of husks and broken pieces of ships just kind of floating, and just like maybe grabbing an SRV and dragging, kind of going through that and dodging things as they're kind of floating by, and like, oh wow, this is a super cool piece of something, and hooking the SRV onto it and hauling it out, away into the black, and then you have your kind of your vehicle muncher there ready to just kind of tear into it, right? So
well, that's the dream.
That is the
dream. Exploring these far off systems and finding these ancient battles, and you're like, ooh, what happened here?
Or maybe some unique alien stuff or whatever. Yeah, it's a huge deal. So you and I we'll get lost on that one. So these deliverables have passed their final review for 3.17.2, which is the additional Lagrange points, of course, the POIs and the space missions, the AI planetary navigation, which we alluded to, and then the illegal delivery missions, which I think you and I have spoke about a little bit in the last podcast, how being able to utilize kind of small cargo stuff and make a few space bucks during that was great. And of course, then we also talked about the Siege of Orison. So all those things I think we talked about before have been committed as final review for 3.17.2. So it looks like most of that stuff's on track, and that's a good thing.
Well, you know, we knew this patch was just going to be, a big content patch.
We did.
But, they're on, it seems like they're on task. And shortly after this patch goes live at the end of the month, then they're going to be working on 3.18, and that's going to be the foot in the door for the future.
Oh, it's really going to light up then. I mean, and not that it's not now. I mean, because really there has been some really game-changing things like refueling and some other things that have been a big part of 3.17. But 3.18, I think really there's some tech in there. There's some future stuff there that really, really does kind of whet the palate for sure.
Oh, something that we can kind of get on the beaten path about for sure.
So, anyways, kind of moving on here. And this is the one thing, and one of the reasons I actually wanted to even just kind of visit the Roadmap Roundup today was this particular thing that was on the progress tracker. So it's called Vehicle Munching, which I really thought that was I really like that name. Salvage Vehicle Munching, implementing the ability to transform large chunks of metal salvaged from ships into a refinable material. This will use the grinder systems aboard salvage ships like the Vulture or the Reclaimer. The Reclaimer's got this massive grinder-looking thing in it. This deliverable has been added to the EUPU gameplay feature team schedule. So, of course, we don't necessarily need to speak to schedule or whatever. Let's just stay in the dream.
I tell you, let me give you a little context for this, for you folks out there listening. So V is like, hey, did you read the roadmap for today? I was like, oh, I haven't got around to it yet. He goes, oh, we need to do the roadmap. I'm like, oh, okay. He goes, he was so excited. He goes, man, you just can't wait. Because that was one of the things was the vehicle munching part that we were, when we saw the way the Vulture was going to work, we were kind of like, oh.
Lasers,
It was a little bit, but
lasers.
Yeah, this was something that we're like, oh yes.
Transforming large chunks of metal is, and just munching giant chunks of metal that's salvage to me, right? That's what salvage, it is. And of course I understand that there's little pieces and big pieces, but, crunching down big pieces and just kind of turning them into something, that's kind of what salvage is to me. It's a big 101 for me in that capacity. I am super excited about that.
Well, when I saw them working, a lot of the things that kind of got brought up on the ship Q&A a couple weeks ago, they're really talking about it. And I revisited it. I went back and looked at a lot of different things. They were talking about damage mapping. Mm-hmm. And the way, the hull breaks apart and things like that. That actually made the way they were really, really, really emphasizing the damage mapping that, as it relates to combat, you're just not going to explode anymore. Whatever, disables your ship, whether you've blown a component out that disables the ship or, it sustained a particular amount of damage where it stops functioning instead of just exploding. And then they kind of emphasized a little bit about how the sections are able, how the ship breaks down into sections and things. And that really kind of piqued my interest because that's what's going to really make the salvage gameplay work, is how these ships break down and how the pieces come off. Not necessarily, like I said, we kind of kick rocks a little bit when we were thinking, the only thing that basically we're going to do is be disintegrating, the skin of the ship or something like that. And we're like, that is not engaging gameplay.
Well, yeah, hull stripping's not salvage. I mean, I think that's kind of, and I don't mean that, I understand you have to have a tier 0. I'm not knocking it at all, but like salvage is a whole different situation than that. I mean, and I think you're hitting on a super important point. When you kind of knock a ship out, if you knock out a component and it slows to a crawl, and then you kind of board that ship and do whatever, or if there's a lot more salvage to be had if a ship has been disabled and instead of just kind of disintegrated. I mean, I think that's the point you're making. It's an excellent one.
So, and I guess another thing too is when someone feels their ship was so damaged it was unrecoverable, so they just claim it,
abandon
they do it, an insurance claim. Does that hull, or does it disappear and become the rebuilt ship, or is a rebuilt ship sort of like how it kind of works now when we reclaim a ship? That other ship will persist. Is that how it's going to work, where the old hull of the ship will remain and when you claim a new one?
It's a great question. I mean, and we've talked about this nomad fleet, or like a type of thing. And there are going to be some pirate organizations that I bet are banking on that, right? They're gonna go through. They're gonna attack people. They're gonna destroy their ships. And they're very much hoping that there's going to be some things left there for them to kind of pick through. They want to, get your salvage crews out there, and kind of, vulture's a good term. You want to kind of get on those things and get all the fuel out of them that you can, and get all the components out of them that you can, and anything that's worth, has any value to it, kind of get it processed. And that certainly won't be the case if somebody just kind of goes back to, you blew me up, I'll get out of the bed, run over to the terminal and claim the ship, and it's yanked out of the verse, so.
Then again, when persistence, when we're in an age of persistence, I mean, is the system just going to be littered with, broken down ships? How fast are people going to get out and salvage those things?
I wonder,
maybe is it going to be like tons of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe it would be cool if you could tag something. If you tagged it, then it could be, it could persist longer. Type of thing. Like, like if you killed somebody and you're like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tear this thing apart and see what's in it. Mm-hmm. And you could put some kind of a tag on it or whatever for like a salvage claim or whatever type of thing on it. Kind of an interesting thought.
That is, yeah. If it's any indication of the way things work these days, it's, if you've been anywhere inside Star Citizen where you see the, 50 boxes laying around all over the place where people had dropped their med gowns, is it going to be that kind of situation where, people go out and they're dogfighting or whatever and get blown up, and it's going to be the equivalent of one of those gowns just laying about the area. It works for us because we love the idea of going up there, and you're right. When you told me about that was very exciting to me. Vehicle munching.
Yeah, vehicle munching. I mean, it's great. So the next thing on there, is very interesting, and it's something that I think it's so strange because I think we've kind of on the periphery talked about this, like how this is going to work. And freight elevators is not something that I ever really kind of thought about prior to this. I'm sure they were mentioned. I think I have heard of it before, but it did pop back up, right? So implementation of systems and content for players to physically load and unload cargo to and from their ships by conveying cargo to and from hangars, landing pads, garages, and docking collars. So freight elevators, I mean, this is going to be, you'd imagine, so you go down and you stop at a station, you order some freight. There's going to have to be some way that freight gets kind of put into a spot where you can get a hold of it, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. For me, more the remote outposts, like it's always kind of how on earth, like if I'm going to land on some like remote outpost and I don't see a whole bunch of titanium sitting there, how am I supposed to fill my cargo hold? With the physicalized stuff. But, here nor there, I think the freight elevators are probably going to play out more in like your stations and that type of thing.
Well, that's the way I see the freight elevators. And something that was kind of explained, and this has been, holy crap, years ago. But when your hanger becomes persistent, and that shouldn't be too long, they say after after they get the sharding and the meshing done, that your hab and your hanger, I think your hanger was coming before your hab, your persistent hanger where you store things, that's how that's going to come into play.
Yeah, I think that was originally slated for 3.17 almost. It seems like, I know it got pushed or whatever, but
yeah, it does. Yeah, that does sound right. But yeah, if we go back on the tracker and see,
that is interesting. I didn't think about that. I mean, it's an interesting point that you do raise when it comes to freight elevators, kind of, and how they would, how you would be able to move a lot of stuff, to someplace else from your hangar. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing. It probably will work in a similar fashion to the way that the medical hangars work. When you land in like a landing zone, and you can kind of somehow or another get somebody over to one of the medical bays or whatever, and then they just kind of disappear and they kind of wake up and in like the hospital. They're probably going to work very similar to that type of thing.
Well, it says in the progress tracker that it's going to be a second quarter all the way to the first quarter of 23. So from September to February, that's when they're going to be working on that. I wouldn't believe, I wouldn't think that they would deliver persistent hangers or anything like that before they got, some of the things that make them work done, like the freight elevators.
Yep. And we've kind of, like, just to make sure everybody understands, we've kind of, there were these things that were for 317.2. We've moved on to progress tracker stuff. I hope, it's one of the things, that's just kind of coming up in the future. Vehicle munchings in the future. Freight elevators are in the future. They're just being added to the feature team's schedule. And just because they're added doesn't necessarily mean that they're even going to be done in those time frames. But they're kind of fun to talk about, and definitely can add. You can see how they're going to add to the experience, of the gameplay for sure.
That's interesting. The docking collars. I was just looking at that again. Wow, it's going to be a pretty giant docking collar. I guess in a way, a lot of these, if you have one of those ships that is not landable, and you have to dock it on one of these stations, how do you get cargo? When cargo becomes physicalized, how do you get cargo in it? I guess they drop it off at the docking collar. That's going to be pretty wild.
That is going to be pretty wild. I mean, yeah, I guess you're making a really excellent point, kind of pulling the docking collars out of there in particular. I mean, obviously, if you've ever ran down one of those docking collars that, like, if you run out to an 890, it's a pretty big tube. I mean, it's nothing.
We were doing a video for a buddy of mine, and we're trying to explain how big a particular ship was. Well, it was during Invictus, and we were lining up side by side across that docking collar that went to the Javelin, and it took more than side by side. It was like 20-something bodies side by side all the way across.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're, those collars can be pretty big. I mean, it's actually, it's the thing, right? I guess when you stop and look at some things, you appreciate the scale of this game. I mean,
it is one of those things that we'll just keep coming back to again and again and again. And it's the awe and the audacious nature of Star Citizen. Star Citizen is taking on scale like no other game really has, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah.
It's
people ask
close.
all the time, should I, is it a good time, I have friends of mine, it's a good time to play the game. And I was like, if you like to be awed all the time, yes.
It's a very good way to put
it. Has look, it has its shortcomings. It's still far from completion. But hey, we play it, we play it every week, and we still get that awe factor.
Oh, so. Absolutely, all the time. So moving on, we got the new player experience with this, and I thought this was kind of an interesting read. An initiative for improving the initial first 30 minutes of gameplay experience, which will help players understand the context of the world and introduce them to some Star Citizen's basic features. This will include updates to landing zones, spaceports, hubs, shops, and more. So this deliverable has been added to the EU landing zone team schedule. So, it's... I guess at some point, maybe you're gonna experience your first 30 minutes someplace else than a landing zone. I think that's the thing. One of the things I take out of that.
Well, let's just face it. Star Citizen has a huge learning curve.
Oh, absolutely.
The way it is, presently, we lack a lot of tools right now, and I think this is one of the first steps of getting acclimated to the game. Yes, the star map is going to be changed within the next year. Yes, the Mobi-Glass is, the 2.0 is getting a huge rehaul. That are, that's some of the points right now for a new player that, if you're just, trying it out for the first time, those might be some sticking points. Well, the non-functionality of a lot of those things, it's hard for some players.
It is, and all MMOs have those. I mean, MMOs usually, it's very rare that an MMO doesn't have like your first 30 minutes where it's going to teach you how to, WASD, what's jump, what's eat, what's crouch, what's, how are you going to draw a weapon? How are you going to put out a medical tool? You have to have some, I think, obviously, some context about the world itself is absolutely helpful as well. You have to have kind of like the basics. I mean, I know, and I know that you are as well, Zell. I mean, being a fairly astute MMO, player, the first time I got on my Cutlass flag and tried to take off at Area 18, I mean, I was, it took me, I had to ask globally, like, why can't I leave? And they're like, well, you hit K to VTOL your engines, I couldn't take off, I could only go so high. So, I think like you said, the learning curve is steep. And having some kind of a situation where people can kind of get acclimated is pretty standard fare for MMOs, and looks like Star Citizen probably wants to do a similar thing.
Well, with the way things have been going, we are seeing a huge influx of new players.
Yeah,
and adding the new player experience to keep that retention, it's key. You don't want a situation where like all these guys came in during Invictus, and how many of them were like, oh man, this is just too darn complicated, it's pretty janky, yeah, it is definitely not ready, I may be back. You don't want those first, even the small ones, you don't want those first experiences be a total turnoff.
I couldn't agree more.
And to keep those new players, engaged and involved. I would like to see, they're talking about, the introducing a lot of that stuff. I honestly believe it needs to be more than, say, a 30-minute experience. Heck, it would take you more than 30 minutes just to learn the key bindings for FPS, let alone all the different chip key bindings you have.
I agree. I think you're right. I think, this is probably their first stab at it, just to kind of get, you got to kind of cobble something together at first, but I 100% agree. I think that there should be, something that's your first 30 minutes of FPS, your first 30 minutes of space flight, maybe your first, somebody who some kind of a mission, almost like a single player type mission where maybe you go on a cargo run and you're just the co-pilot, and there's a pilot who actually flies the ship and kind of talks you through what he's doing, something like that. Or maybe you're just a passenger on like your uncle's old junker that he's gonna take you for a spin in or something, whatever, something like that.
What I would like to see is at all the different starting locations, whether it be Area 18, Microtech, I would like to see at least 3 or 4 hours of gameplay on the ground in those areas at the very beginning, running missions and things, being able to explore the city a little bit better. I don't know how many times we see in chat is like, how do I get to such and such, and how do I get back? And a lot of that would help if, when they expand, they've spoken about expanding a lot of the city areas way out.
Yeah, ground vehicles, roads. You know what I mean? It's like maybe in order to earn your first spaceship, or to get to the terminals or whatever, or to earn your wings, you got to do some things. You know what I mean, type of thing.
Well, that's the thing. If you don't play, I'd like to see how that works out, and not to go off the road too much, but they say playing Squadron 42, gives you your citizenship. I mean, that, it's the whole basis of the game, right? Is earning your citizenship. And if you're a new player, didn't play Squadron 42, how do you earn your wings? Maybe in those couple hours of missions, that's how you earn your wings, so you're able to, fly your first ship.
And they're really going to, if you think about it, I mean, Squadron 42, as they began to kind of really ramping that up and pushing it out, I mean, they're going to be really poised if they were ever going to put some more linear opening sequences in for the PU. I mean, you're going to have a very well-oiled team coming away from Squadron 42 for that type of thing, and it probably would be a breath of fresh air for some of those teams as well. And so an interesting thought for sure. So, I think it's a healthy, like, making sure new players have a good experience is super healthy for the game, and I think it's an important thing.
I think it's essential for the game.
Absolutely. So moving on, this next one's kind of interesting. Player kind of / machine physical interaction, and I think this is, like they say, initial implementation of animations that show the player interacting with ship controls and items. So I think, like, if you're sitting there in a co-pilot seat, like, let's say I have something mapped to my stick, like if I kind of like open the doors or something, my character would actually reach down and physically maybe flick a switch or something. It's that kind of, I think that actually could be really cool. They also talk about interacting with other areas of the cockpit, and they also talk about interacting with other machines and items like locker doors. I'm sure there's all sorts of like these food vending machines, that type of stuff. I would imagine that's all going to kind of play into that tech.
Well, I guess this is the beginning to all that. All those buttons on the ship are supposed to be interactable.
Yes.
You can interact with each individual little button that that has, if the ship has a particular functionality.
Absolutely. And I mean, we sit here and we have, like our joysticks and our keyboard and our mouse. When your character sits physically in there, there is supposed to be a switch, a knob, a button, physicalized for every one of the things that you can do in there. And that's that's just basically the tie-in, making it look cool. I mean, there's nothing cooler than watching, like if you watch kind of like somebody piloting like a plane or something, all the things that they're doing, kind of looking up, kind of clicking this, clicking that. I think you see that kind of in the Star Wars movies as well, when they're about to go to hyperspace type of thing. They're clicking all the stuff, getting ready, all
the preparation.
Yeah, exactly. And then that type of thing. So I think that's a that's an interesting thing, and of course, like I said, any time that you have where it looks more realistic is and that's what Star Citizen goes for.
That's where a lot of our immersion is going to come from as well.
Truly,
is interacting. When you hit a keybind on your keyboard or a keybind on your joystick, you're going to see your character, flick that switch or hit that button, and that's going to bring the immersion level up. It's going to be huge, and for people that love big sandboxes like this, that's those little details, that's what gets us.
I agree 100% with that. So moving on, we got the Aegis Retaliator base, and it's so not to give too much away, but this is something that's right up our alley right now.
Yeah.
Building, implementing, and balancing the base variant of the Aegis multi-crew combat ship. The Retaliator is a game-ready vehicle. So, right now, most people who play Star Citizen, who are familiar with the Retaliator, know the Retaliator's got these, these things that it can do. Right now, there's one Retaliator in the game. It's the torpedo version of it, but there are going to be these modules that can switch things up in it and that type of thing, and they don't have the base variant in there right now. They just basically, the only one that's in the game right now is kind of the missile boat version of the Retaliator, or the modular torpedo version of it. And so getting the base one in place is probably one of the beginnings to kind of getting the rest of the modular things for the Aegis Retaliator in place.
Well, I'll tell you, for the Retaliator, for people out there that are looking for, kind of that mid-range money to spend, if you're going to spend money on this game, buying a ship that is modular is probably the way to go. And the Retaliator, dollar for dollar, is probably the best bang for the buck right now. Because you can, for the base, let me clarify that. For the base Retaliator, it's probably the best bang for the buck.
How much is the base Retaliator?
It's $150.
Yeah.
It's $150. And when the modularity comes in, if they're working on the base right now, so you would think the modularity is coming pretty soon. So you can add cargo capacity. You could add turn it into a drop ship. It has drop ship modules. It has different components to change out a lot of the different rooms to make it more of a cargo hauler than a military variant.
They have living quarters, like one of those things.
It's living quarters.
Yeah.
All these things, and you're going to get to keep your 7 turrets. But it's going to be one of those things where you're going to get bang for your buck out of that particular base model, because you can do a lot of different things with it. It's one of the things where, a lot of the ships in the game, people buy it because, ooh, that's cool, but they don't think about what are they really going to do with it in the future. Is it something that they can make money with? Because the first thing when the game goes live is you're going to have to start making money somehow. And if you say spend a lot of money on, that's why I would never recommend buying fighters, because they just don't have the variations that you could do with. You can go do bounty missions, but that's the only function that they have. You can't run cargo. You can't use it to, say, go run mining materials. Yeah, any of these things. The Retaliator, as it is right now, if it's in its modularity, you could do you can run cargo missions, especially if you're a person that, lacks a more varied gameplay experience. Something that's modular is the way to go. And it's the same thing. That's the reason why the Connies are are pretty popular.
Yeah,
Although
I
believe the
mean,
Connies are kind of overpriced, but that's my thought on it. But
yeah. Well, I listen. I think you're striking some really good points. I mean, when you start in Star Citizen, Zell's absolutely right. I think if you just buy a fighter, like especially like a Mustang, like that, you really don't have a lot of wiggle room. You're just combat. That's what you're doing. Now there's FPS combat. You can land and go in some bunkers, and you can of course do the space combat missions. But if you happen to buy something that's got a little more jack of all trade, like a Cutlass Black or like an Aegis Retaliator, it's going to have a lot more. It can do a lot more. Something like a Cutlass Black, you can still do some of the mid to even mid-high level bounty missions, but then you can also turn around and haul an ROC with it. You know what I mean? And you can do some mining stuff with it. You can do some light cargo hauling with it with 46 SCU. But the as far as like these, because there's a lot of ships that are going to have modularity. I know that the big three that get talked about are kind of the Retaliator, the Caterpillar, and I think the Endeavor is the other one. There are other ships too, but that $150 price point on the Retaliator base is a pretty solid investment because of that. That you're going to have the different styles of gameplay that you're going to be able to do. You want to take a bunch of people with you someplace, throw in the dropship. If you want to kind of a home away from home type of thing, throw in the living quarters. If you want to go really hunt down some Idrises, throw in the torpedo.
Throw in the torpedo bays.
Absolutely, you know what I mean. So it's that kind of being able to to kind of. You have one ship, but you can just kind of swap things out, and it can specialize a little bit. There's not a lot. I mean, the other way to do that is to buy multiple ships. So that's what we're saying. That's why it's such a value, right? You're buying one ship, and then you're just getting the different pieces, the different modular pieces for it. It's there's a lot to be said for it, for sure. I think that it's those who kind of think about that stuff, and boy, we sure do. It is going to be interesting as that modularity kind of moves forward. So
yeah, I mean, you do a lot of different things with it, and that's the cool part about it. I know there's a lot of different other ships that are similar, but I'd say bang for the buck if you want something that has a multiplayer gameplay. Because this thing has 7 turrets, you guys could get out into the verse and really do a lot of different things with it. Or if you're a solo, you're a solo cargo runner, you put that cargo module in, you'll be able to run cargo. And one of the things that I would like to recommend for anybody just getting into the game is buy a ship that's going to make you money. Because, if things that's near and dear to us, mining, salvage, doing cargo hauling, all these things that we like to do, all this industrious gameplay, these things make money.
Yep.
And you want to make the most bang for your buck as it relates to games, because when the game goes live, that's how you purchase other ships in the game.
Yep.
We're definitely not saying that, like, don't buy the fighters, just don't spend money on it. Make sure that you're gonna spend money on, if you got the cash, by all means. But I'm saying if you're limited on a budget,
sure,
you want to buy the best bang for the buck. Not to say that you were talking about the Cuddy. Cuddy is a good bang for the buck. The Titan, the Avenger Titan, great bang for the buck.
Absolutely.
All these things have multiple roles. You can do multiple roles with these ships. Like the Titan Avenger, you can haul a little cargo. You can do bounty hunting missions with it.
You can even sneak a bike up into that thing.
Yeah. Yep. You can cram a bike in there. But you can do a lot of. It has a lot of variable gameplay that you can do with it. As if, don't get me wrong. I mean, one of the first packages that I ever bought was the Mustang package because the Mustang looks cool.
It does look cool.
But you'd probably be better off, getting like a Avenger Titan or even the other $40 game packages.
Yeah, well, I mean, an Aurora. I mean, just because it's got a little bit of space to do the box missions, right? If you get the Aurora with the 4 guns on it, it's slightly less combat capable, but more or less on par from a combat standpoint. But then you absolutely can then haul boxes as well. Now, I'm always I think you've mentioned the Titan Avenger a few times, or the Avenger Titan a few times, and I that ship's, I mean, it's still at that price point currently is a really, really, really good ship. I think there's a reason why so many people recommend it. It's just because of the versatility. You have a little bit of cargo space, a bed, it's got a size 4 gun on the front. There's a lot going on for that thing at that price point, and I think there's a good thing to be said about that. So kind of wrapping up here on the old Roadmap Roundup, and kind of and then no slouch in and of itself, the Anvil Crucible. Building, implementing, balancing the Anvil ship repair platform, the Crucible, as a game-ready vehicle. So that also has been added. So, the Crucible is one of those critical pieces of that Nomad fleet, I think going forward, one of my favorite gameplay loops to pontificate about is taking salvaging a ship, salvaging components off a ship, hauling those components, over to something like the Crucible and repairing those components, taking those components over to your Endeavor, and then using, speaking of modularity, using one of those module components, I forgot what it's called, but it basically is for over-tuning or overclocking components. I think it's called like a quantum accelerator or something. It's a weird name. I can look it up. But then once you have your these components, just kind of you've salvaged them, you've repaired them, then you've overclocked them, overtuned them, or whatever, made them better than what they were. Then you take it over to your abandoned merchantman and put them out. Sell them. It's an important sell them. You know what I mean? So that's to me, wow. Obviously mining really is the most near and dear thing to my heart, but that particular thought, is also one that really, really the Crucible is a critical piece of that, and also just a critical piece of Pyro going forward, I think.
Well, it's going to be a mainstay for medium to large orgs. Large orgs will have several of them.
Yep.
We'll have a couple of them, but they're going to be essential. Along with the Liberator, they're going to be a essential ship for moving further into the verse. Whether it, we're looking, far ahead into the future. These are the things that you're going to need to move, multiple systems outward. To whether you're, looking for your, home base or you're looking for the gameplay in those particular systems. Ships like the Crucible, ships like the Liberator, ships like something that we may touch on a little bit later, the Starfare, all essential ships for that particular gameplay.
Absolutely essential. That was called the Super Collider. That was one of the modular pieces of the Endeavor.
Super Collider, right.
Yeah, this elaborate overclocking facility includes a pair of White Room workbench labs, ideal for tweaking and overclocking ship components like weapons or thrusters, pushing them to their theoretical limits. And that hits on something where, one of the things I know, you and I circle around a lot and talk about Star Wars Galaxies. And Galaxies had a very, very, probably, in my opinion, the early part of Galaxies had probably the best crafting system ever in an MMO, and I don't even know that it's close. But that's it's opinion. It's my opinion. But one of the things that could happen when you did crafting right in Star Wars Galaxies, where you would just get these lucky just one-offs, that you just did this crazy thing that, like you took all of these, all the best different components to create this thing. But then there was also this chance as you kind of, crafted it, that it may just be...
And Jesus blesses you.
Right. RNG Jesus just intervenes and like it just does something like incredible.
Yep.
And I really hope, because Star Citizen, who knows who the crafting will be in the future or whatever, or what crafting there will be, and what the scale is. But if they do crafting, I really would like to see it doesn't even bother me if some guy's out there in a Gladius and for whatever reason his Gladius is just 1.5 times more maneuverable than mine, because somehow or another he got RNG to just bless him with this crazy overclock on his on his thrusters or something.
Engineering, those are the big things that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
And how the implications of engineering and just the ability to hot rod something up to its maximum.
Absolutely.
I mean, we come from I'm such a mini maxer. I'm such a nerd. I make spreadsheets for for the littlest things. We're talking about how kind of having that A-team moment. I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, absolutely.
How just doing theory crafting on my spreadsheet, opened up a whole different gameplay avenue for us as related to mining. Things that, running across things that people haven't touched on yet, because sometimes I think, a lot of players take the game for granted and think, a lot of these different things of the game are, they're not working as intended, and that is true. But there's some things that people kind of overlook when you're talking about modules or laser heads and things like that. There is, we're finding out there's a lot of different ways of tweaking a lot of that out, and we really love that mini-max part of the game, and the fact that we could take a super collider and really go in there and tweak each individual component and just hot rod that ship up. That's so amazing. It's one of those things with Star Wars Galaxies, like we were saying. I'm about to hit that 4-wheel button, so we're going to be going off-roading here pretty soon. But
love it.
You brought up. What's funny is you brought up the Banu Merchant and Star Wars Galaxies at the same time, and then then another whirlwind went off in my head, thinking, well, especially when it relates to crafting, what are you going to be able to do on the Merchant? It's like, yes, it's going to be a marketplace. It's going to be a place where people sell things, but what are they going to be selling? To be honest, I believe that crafting is going to have to become an essential part of the game, sort of how it was in Star Wars Galaxies. It may not be the same, but where we were out every week, at least within a week, maybe a couple days, chasing a particular, whether it be an ore or some sort of polymer.
Yep.
When these things spawned up, we were looking for the
highest concentrations.
What kind of quality it had, and if it had the best quality, we were putting extractors on it, and we're putting the wells on them, and we were extracting all that out because that was an essential part of your crafting, because you got the better quality materials, you most definitely would make the best quality items. Like, it was very varied. I mean, even down to it, and that was the beauty part about, say, Galaxies, because heck, everything that you used you could craft, whether it was down to your workbench, your droid, the clothes that you wore.
Yep.
So you had like an apron. These aprons could, they called them tapes, but basically they were these enhancements that gave you plus percentage, or multiples. You can create multiples of one particular item, and it's all these different buffs that you would get. And you essentially, with all the best material, could make a legendary quality item. Now, I know Star Citizen isn't going to be that fleshed out, but Chris Roberts did say, at the beginning of the year, that crafting is going to have to come into the game.
What?
And at what extent that is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that got me thinking, is what are you gonna, all the different things that are you gonna sell on the Banu Merchant? Is it just gonna be things that you looted? Is it gonna be components? And who are gonna be selling these? Is it gonna be NPCs? Or are you gonna make a deal with player characters where they can use your marketplace to sell things? I mean, I'm very curious to how that kind of gameplay is all going to work out. So,
I mean, and I agree with that 1,000%. I mean, 100% agree with what you're saying, as far as how it's going to work out. I really do. I mean, if it's a wish, and who, I'm just a guy. But I really do hope that if they decide to introduce crafting into the game, that they do take a long and hard look at the way that Galaxies did crafting. Obviously there's other ones as well, but you talk about, like, when we were just reading the Super Collider earlier, I was talking about theoretical limits. I mean, that was one of the things about Galaxies that I really thought was neat, right? It's like, so you started out, there'd only been, the first month went by, you just, whatever, you got your best metal you could find, your best polymer you could find, your best this, your best that, your best, and then you brought it back together, and then you could make a gun that had, whatever stats on it. But as time wore on, and different things spawned with different qualities and different there were these individual stats on everything that you could harvest, and you could kind of get this, talk about spreadsheets, this magic group of things together over a period of a couple of years of harvesting. And then, you take that and you have, like you said, the different items that you would wear when you would craft, and, and the things that would be in your workbenches and those types of things. And, it does sound a lot like the Super Collider in a way, where you would really then just kind of push something to its theoretical limit. Where, I mean, like you said, there's like legendary quality. Like, if you, the gun that you had, I mean, they're the same gun, they look the same, but it was it's incredible, the stats, like after a couple of years of harvesting, you know what I mean, like how incredible those things were. Now, like I said, that it's a bit of a deep dive. Like you said, we're going to put it in 4-wheel drive and get off the beaten path here. I definitely hope that if there's some kind of a craft, I don't necessarily know that it needs to be quite where everything has multiple stats on it and that type of thing, but I do hope that they do at least introduce these randomizations where you can, if you found, like, maybe there's some higher quality things or something or another, and if you just kind of put the right things together, all of a sudden you're crafting really high quality things, and then people, like, all of a sudden, like, it's like, wait a minute, that's the guy who makes those XL1 drives that are even, Like you could become like you happen to know that if you go to this one system and you just kind of grab the aluminum there, and then you go to this other system and you grab, the diamond there, and you go to this other system and you grab the corundum there, and you use, those are your three base components for this thing you're making. For whatever reason, it just comes out better when you make that item than some of the other things. Like something like that would be amazing to me.
And it does add a little bit more complexity to the game. And it's not too far off of what they've already said, that you could specialize as an engineer. You can specialize in, using the collider and, being able to tweak a particular item, up to its, theoretical limit. And they did say that, you could specialize in that. So adding that point where, where not everybody's going to want to do it, where you have to run, pretty far out and say 10 different places to get all the best material to make a particular, or to upgrade a particular item to be the best, and say you were the guy. And we had that in Galaxies as well. You had a lot of the crafters that did specialize in certain items. You had the one, because I had the best T-71 rifle in the game, because this one guy had a 1,000 of 1,000, and I'm sorry, to give you a little context, 1,000 quality was the best of the best of the best.
Right.
When you were looking for a particular ore or anything, and if you found it in a large quantity at 1,000%, everybody and their mother would be out there trying to mine that particular material. And it spawned, in random locations all the time. It was never the same place. So and this is another great thing to kind of go back into what we were saying. You would have to actively go search for it. You had a little sensor, and it would start looking for different materials, and it would tell you if you're in a higher quantity of it. It would start out somewhere like 20%, and you'd go in a particular direction, and you'd kind of have to coordinate it. It's like, oh, it's 20% here, but it's only 15% here, so it must be back this way. And then you started, finding where it was at a higher percentage. You'd go from that 55% to 70% to 80%, and then finally you'd hit that one spot. And if you were out there before everybody else, and there wasn't a 100 mining nodes,
yep,
then you'd plop down your miner,
yep,
and get that large, quality stuff.
I mean, and that stuff became so valuable in the game, and it's just the one thing I want to say. I mean, just kind of before I circle back to that part of it, is one of the most, one of the reasons I was so endeared to Star Wars Galaxies is just for that particular thing, right? You had this whole concept of, I mean, I remember being out there before there were even ground vehicles, like using mounts or even on foot, trying to locate things to put the harvester fleets on. When I was down, I had my first one or two, harvesting devices, you know what I mean? But I actually made quite a bit of money selling locations to people. It's like I would find a really good location, maybe an 87% spot, and then from there it would kind of radiate around. From that one spot it would go 86, 85 and drop off, but once you kind of got your fleet up, then you could just go around and say, hey, I've got a good spot if somebody wants, 67% spot on this really good non-ferrous metal or whatever type of thing. One of the funnest kind of just things for me to do. You want to talk about Star Citizen as kind of like this this thing that you log in. It's kind of like your like Second Life, right, or whatever. Like you're one way to kind of experience the future today type of thing. That's the one thing Galaxies did right. I mean, when you'd log on there, it's like, oh, I've got to go manage my harvester fleets. This is one of the funnest things in the world to do to me, was to go over to my solar farm or my wind farms or whatever, and pick up your energy, then go make sure you went on your energy run for all of your harvester fleets. Making sure that their maintenance was taken care of for those things. Kind of pulling the materials out, maybe bringing them back and centralizing them at wherever your crafting location was. It's just that whole, like I said, Star Citizen would really do themselves a huge favor if they just kind of peel open that onion and take a close look at it, because realistically, it was such an amazing. Such a fun time, such an amazing time, and like if they don't take anything away from it, just the randomization. Don't make it so modular where everybody just makes the exact same XL1 drive. Throw some kind of a spin in it where somebody can make a better one than another guy. Give somebody the opportunity to put the time and energy in to make a better something than the next guy down the road, if that's what you want to do in the game.
Well, that's why we wax nostalgic about Galaxies a lot, is that the experience that we got was player driven.
Yes.
They did a good job of the economy, was completely player driven.
Absolutely.
They added the tools in, and as it related to they had a bazaar, which is basically kind of like, if you ever played an MMO, it was like an auction house, and you rolled up, but you couldn't buy items from it specifically. It would just tell you where people would kind of post and say, hey, my shop is on Dathmere at these coordinates. We have a shuttle port. This is where you're going to buy, this particular item with this particular stats. And they, Lucas kind of gave them the tools to build out the player experience. And the reason that we make the correlation between the two is because that's the way Star Citizen, how they said they want the game to go.
Right.
They want the players to drive the experience. They want, that's how things like Jump Town get started.
Right.
These are player-driven experiences. We just don't have the tools for them yet. And, how far they're going, what tool set that they're going to give us, we don't know completely.
We don't know.
Like this collider. Yeah, that's one thing. But if they did add in where you went and got materials from, these far off and different locations, where you would make only the hardened crafter, those are the guys that are, those are the people that will, take the effort to go all over and find the best materials, because they want to make the best quantum drive ever, or they want to make the best shields ever, or they want to tweak the best guns ever. These are the things that really would drive the economy. These are the things that would really drive the gameplay, because it's like, hey,
yeah, it's a scarcity.
Like, we need to go get some shields. It's like, you know what? Bob makes the best shields in the game.
Yep.
And so go. And a lot of these things that were, reason, we're relating both of them is because there's a lot of similarities, and that's basically what's driven us to this game to begin with. Is that's the that the open gameplay is really the sci-fi elements, the ships, the exotic locations. These are the things that kind of drive us. And if you go back and look at, say, Galaxies, it's a lot of things that have, if you look at MMOs from the past, for the past 20 years, because Galaxies was 20 years ago.
Yes.
Think about that. Think of 20 years ago.
It blows my mind.
And the amount of tech that was in that game. I've never seen a game ever since. And besides Star Citizen, that was that ambitious, that, you know, had that level of detail, had that level of, you know, where you could basically do anything. I mean, you could be a droid engineer. You could make your own droids.
Yes.
You could, it got to the point where you could become a shipwright. You could make your own ships.
Yep.
You take those crafting, the same crafting principles that it would take for you to, I mean, you even made tools in the game. You know, made tools to make other tools. You know, it was pretty wild, but you could make ships like that. And then you could start making you know, they had factories, literal factories where you put blueprints in, and it would pump these items out as long as you had the material.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. I mean, you mentioned the blueprint. Remember, like, that was the crazy thing. Like, if you created, like, one of those theoretical limit type items, then you could blueprint that thing.
Yeah. You got that. You got that smile from RNGesus, and then you're like, ooh, I'm making a blueprint of this.
And you could become the guy. You know, like, my doctor buffs were on par with the best in the game. You know, like I think there was a handful of us doctors. I would have people lined up. Like, I'd log in, and I had some kind of a macro system. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but people would line up for, you know, you just set your character there, and then people would say some words to you, and like you just stick them with the different, you know, like syringes or whatever to like buff them up, and they would. I mean, it would be a non-stop, every time I logged on, it never stopped. Like, it would be literally all day long, every day. As long as, if I was logged on and doing that, I was just making money buffing people with my stuff. You know?
What was wild about that? Yeah, you made those, you know, the barking commands, you know,
right.
My barking is that, you know, you'd see the visual text in the game. But it also gave you the functionality where you gave those buffs out and got paid.
Yes.
After you gave the buff. The same thing, you know, if you had a shop in Galaxies, here's something that we haven't seen, where it had NPC vendors.
Yes.
Where they would go, hey, we sell the best guns in the game. Would you like to buy one? I mean, they actually spoke. You'd see the voice bubble and everything, and you're like, well, absolutely. And you would go and, you know, buy items off of them. Then you know, you'd click on them, and there's like, what do you want to buy? You know, and it'd have the different categories: rifles, handguns, whatever. And then you click on it, and there it is. You know, that's all the stuff that I sell. You'd see those vendors all over the place. That's something that definitely, that's the reason it sparked my imagination a little bit when you said Banu Merchantman and Star Wars Galaxies. I was like, well, how is that going to work on the Banu? That is the Banu Merchantman, probably out of all the ships in the game. Probably everyone's like, oh, it's my favorite ship. Hasn't even been created yet.
I know.
I've seen so many people say, oh, my favorite ship, Banu Merchantman. Okay, cool.
Well, you're exactly right.
How's it going to work?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, it really is an excellent question. I mean, are you going to fly over and fly all around and just kind of buy the things to reset? I mean, no. I mean, you got to make stuff. I mean, you somehow or another you have to come up with stuff to sell on that thing. You know,
I honestly believe in that, and that's the reason that kind of sparked this whole conversation was you're going to have crafting at some level. You're going to have to make it unique for people to want to go and track your Banu Merchantman down to go buy something. If not, then I'd just go to a daggum vendor.
You know, understand, you know, and I truly believe this. There are bounty hunters that are willing to do whatever they possibly can to have the best piece of kit on their side. There are, you know, I mean, that is a for sure thing. There are miners who are willing to go to the nines to have the coolest mining lasers. You know, like, you know what I mean? There are, do not underestimate people's willingness to to walk through any amount of hours if they can somehow affect the items around them and make them better. You know, it is just, that is, that would drive the universe forward. Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, I'm that weirdo that would spend 20 hours a week making new things.
Yep.
Tweaking my mining lasers, hot rodding my prospector up, going to the nths of the universe to find that unique quality material.
Yep.
That's what gets my gears spinning for
Absolutely. Sure. I mean, that whole concept of being able to find something unique, kind of, and then find a way to kind of, harvest that unique thing or do something that kind of, it's outside of the kind of the homogeneous box, right? It's in kind of that, it's just unique, being able to allow people to create unique things. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that nothing, like if somebody's tractor beam, like they can shoot it like twice the distance of a normal one because they found some component to tweak it with, or anything like that. Like if somebody now has a scope that goes 200 more meters than the best scope you can buy in the, in the shop, and this is the only, this guy, he's got like 200 of them. People are going to track that. People will jump 7 systems to go to that band enrichment and buy that.
And that's another thing too that also brings in the resource rarity, scarcity,
exactly,
gameplay to it. That's why people will fight over systems, because
if you think Jumptown was fun,
I honestly believe if I had a hotline to Chris Roberts, I'd be going, dude, we got to do this. Whatever materials it takes to make these particular items, whether, let's just say your aluminum at 100%, say there was aluminum that spawned in, something that we're familiar with, say like Terra.
Right.
And so you'd go to Terra, like, ooh, I heard that, Terra had 100% aluminum. We haven't seen 100% aluminum in months.
Right.
The best we've seen so far is at like 75%.
Yep, 787s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever. But that's a 961, man. We've got to go get that stuff.
Yep. And everybody would be heading that way, man. Fighting for that stuff. So that's how you create those
funnels.
Those detention zones, those little hot spots where people are out looking for the best. And someone said, hey, so.
Well, that's how you create economy though too, because somebody's going to be like, they got in early and they got a bunch of that stuff, and then it got popular, and now, it's like. That's the stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, could you imagine? It's like, hey, I'm going to give you 1 unit of this. Okay, now I'm going to like analyze it. Oh yeah, this is that stuff for sure. I want it.
That's how you drive the economy, because whoever is the the dominant ones out there mine it up, and then they put it out on the market, and they sell the raw material. We'd be out there looking for it first.
Absolutely.
We'd be everywhere. We'd have scouts out everywhere looking for the best of the best of the best, because we want to get our hands on it first. That's the kind of gameplay that drives me. That's what gets us out exploring. That's what gets us out finding and tripping over. You're talking about how exploration or scientific gameplay rolls. That's how that rolls.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how that functions, is getting out and going to these systems that no one's been to before. 100 systems out. They say they wanted to create 100 systems. Yep. And, I hope they do. I really, really do. But say, they're 50 jumps out. People don't get out that far or whatever. These are the things where you get out exploring.
Yep.
You get out and find these things, and you make it randomly spawn in different places all the time. Whether it's going to be there for a week, whether it's going to be there for 2 weeks, or whether it's only going to be there for a couple days.
Imagine this, like if you could have these places where it's so far out that it literally takes like one little player has like their little Deep Space Nine, then the next player like community has their little Deep Space thing, and you have to jump to these player ones in order to get and buy your refueling way, to get to the spot. Then all of a sudden pirates hit the one, you're trapped out there.
Yep.
That
kind of brings us into why you have crucibles, why you have legionnaires.
Exactly.
You bring the whole org with you. It's like we're always on the move.
Yes, we are always on the move. Exactly. So, and you did a really smart thing, like as we launched into this whole, this side conversation. You said, hey, we're about to kind of go off road here, and we did, but only because it does mean so much to us that Star Citizen, like if you think about Galaxies, just to kind of round off my thoughts on Galaxies for now, and I know there's millions of times I'll talk about it again, but there wasn't a game that had FPS, ships, all of the different things, a big sandbox. There are massive similarities to the games. The one thing that is of course different is just the way that Star Citizen is such an incredibly good game. I know it's a hot mess, like of things that don't work, and we struggle with those things all the time. But honestly, once you kind of get bit by this game, it really is a super special. If Star Citizen failed tomorrow, I would be thrilled with the time that I spent in this game. It is, I would be thrilled with the fact that I supported it. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that it absolutely pushes, the boundaries for the next 20 years. You know what I mean? I hope that the rest of the time that I'm on this spinning stone, Star Citizen is here and it continues to get better and better and better. I mean that. Right down to the core of my soul. You know what I mean? That being said, there are these fledgling potentials that you can see in it that really no other game can ever come close to. If they just pick up the mantle on a couple of these things, it's going to go zenith for sure.
Well, I think we need to send the game devs our podcast.
Well, you're not going to find too much.
Just to give them a few little ideas, maybe
there aren't too. You're not going to find too many more excited fellas about it. That's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're a new listener and you're new to Star Citizen, you're gonna, if you really like the sandbox experience, if you really love space games, you're gonna love Star Citizen. You're gonna find something for you. Yes, it's a hot mess, and it's our hot mess, but I guess that's another thing too, is that we love finding the workarounds to these little things that may plague us from now and again, but we do, and I guess that goes into our problem solving love of things. So, but honestly, we have such high hopes, and I think Star Citizen's at that place. Like I said, with 318 on the horizon, at the end of the month, they're going to start the evocati phase of 318. I believe that puts the foot in the door. That's Atlas rolling that ball up to the top of a hill. I believe, after we get 4-0, that's when the ball starts rolling down the hill and gaining speed on the other side.
Oh, I agree with that.
And I believe we're at a point now that, it's just going to be so many good things from here on out. If you are starting the game now, it's a good time to get into the game.
It's a super good time to get into the game, especially like with the fact that you are starting to see the beginning, like the FPS stuff. You can go shoot people and collect loot. That's just an MMO staple. You can. They do have the mining thing fleshed out pretty good. They do have kind of the space combat thing fleshed out pretty good. it's not to say that there aren't bugs or these things they don't consistently work. The dynamic events are starting to come along. There's a new one coming in, 3.17.2 as well. We are starting to get all of the base building blocks together, but that 3.18 is really beginning to come into focus as something. It's really going to be a big linchpin for moving forward.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It most definitely. It's the beginning of things for the future, for sure. I'd say a couple of years ago, that's when because we've both been backers, from early on, and for a long time, I'd log into the game about every 6 months or so to see what the state of the game is, and how everything's progressing.
Yep.
And I used to read the roadmap, all the time, keep up with it. And then I hit that little phase where I go, I'll let it do its, I'll let it percolate for a little while, and then I'll come back.
Yep.
And this last time I came back is when I was like, it's in a state that's pretty fun. and it put its hooks in me, and that's it. But if there's one thing I can articulate to you guys out there, is that these, you brought up the bugs and things, yes, but you can see the ideas coming into focus. You can see things starting to come to fruition. You can see all, it's like, oh, you're like, yeah, but just think, when they get all this on, get all this online, how this is going to change. You're like, oh man, I already love it now. I can't imagine what it's going to be like, when it goes into full implementation, all this stuff gets implemented, full implementation of the game. You're like, oh my, sky's the limit. It's awesome. It's going to be great.
I think that's an excellent segue to, there was a little bit of something I wanted to talk about, and just to kind of just like you're saying, you see kind of something coming that's going to make a big difference in the game, or it's going to be kind of a future piece for how the game's gonna go, and then all of a sudden you get to do it, and you really, really enjoy it. And I want to speak to refueling a little bit. I know that we generally kind of run these things around 2 hours, and we want to leave a little wiggle room in there to chat about refueling. So we have been doing a lot of refueling lately. Not as not every night or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but we have had we're kind of using the Starfarers in fleet movement type things, and we're also doing some training because we want to get very efficient at it. But just peel all that away. Can I just say how I'm not sure I ever wanted to work at a gas station so much in my life. I really like refueling. I think it's a fun thing to do. I think it's a fun thing to just have your ship refueled. I think it's a fun thing to refuel the ships. I love the idea of hailing a ship and then getting a response back and flying up to the boom arm, and and I love the UI. It's not, listen, all that stuff can be improved, but the fact that you kind of have to, kind of open up the tanks and kind of manage the flow, and and all that stuff, and it's a little bit of a mini game to it. Obviously, I think one of the things, to go fast, try and do it as fast as you possibly can, and of course it does have its quirks or whatever. But I just want to say, refueling in general is just a fun thing to do, funner than I expected it to be, but one of those things you kind of see coming, but then when you actually I think if it wasn't it was last night, I believe we had 4 of us standing on the back of that thing with an aerial armor, and then it was a Scorpius, I think. Is that what it was?
Yep, Scorpius.
Yeah, kind of, we were refueling that thing, and man, you're sitting on the back of the Starfarer. It's got these huge catwalks on the back of it. You're looking down at Walla. There's a Scorpius on the end of the boom arm. And then there's the four of you kind of industrial players kind of standing there like managing the UI, the different the terminals at the catwalk, making sure that the refueling gets done correctly. I do not. If you like sci-fi, I don't know. Like, I know it's just a mundane task, but dude, that was a awesome experience. It is a lot of fun.
Well, it takes multiplayer gameplay to the nth degree.
It does.
Because it takes all those guys to run that ship. And it's a beautiful thing. You want to have fun with your friends, get a Starfare. Because it's one of those things there's a lot of fleshing out to do. But even in the state that it's in, you can have so much fun with your friends running a Starfare. We are more of an organized, we have a little bit more organized gameplay, and we want to be the best of the best. That's why we work on it so hard. But just having those guys, all working together, it's awesome.
It is awesome.
You got your fuel boss that's, running the refueling. You got a pilot. You've got, people that are helping to guide the ship in. You've got gunners. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. When they when they kind of rework the interior of the Starfare a little bit, it's going to get a little bit better because it's kind of the way that it's set up. It's kind of a maze, but oh man, it's still an awesome ship.
And just the concept, just the concept of doing ship-to-ship refueling is really fascinating. The fact that, like, when the first time you kind of have a caterpillar come in and it's, just the different ships and just kind of, how the refueling goes and it's a very interesting thing, and I know that it's like for the people who just go, I'll just fly back to a station, it's only Stanton. I get it, but it's going to be at some point as these systems get bigger and we do get out of Stanton, and we will get out of Stanton, at some point you're going to find yourself behind a Starfare and you're going to need fuel. You know what I mean? Yep. And you'll then have that moment probably like, where you're like, this is actually really cool. It really is a cool thing, So just a lot of fun with that. I've really enjoyed that. I do think that it's a critical piece of kind of getting into Pyro, and I hope that I know the training that we're doing is going to pay dividends in the future. We're getting a lot of guys familiar with the UI. We're definitely trying to get our pilots used to kind of how they have to orientate to the craft. How you really do kind of, there's a lot of stuff to kind of learn, and there's a little bit of like just like Star Citizen, it's got its quirks, but overall it's I just enjoyed it.
Like and in the Scorpius like a top. yeah
last night when you terminate, or there's a couple different ways to disengage from at the end of the refueling. There's somebody in the Starfare can do what's called a terminate, which kind of retracts the boom arm and kind of ends the refueling session, or the pilot can hit N, which is kind of breaks the auto dock and breaks the like kind of the you're kind of coupled up to the refueling the boom arm, and if you just kind of hit N, it will break that at that point. There's just kind of a weird bug. Kind of maybe a public service announcement. If you happen to be refueling and you're at the end of your refueling job, and they're either about to terminate or you're about to just hit N and kind of fly away. I think that really the big rule of thumb is don't go anywhere fast, because there are times when the Starfare is kind of there's this reorientation that happens in a blink where like you could be lined up, like literally if you're both facing the same direction, right? Because the nose of the Starfare is and you're facing the tail of the Starfare where the boom arm is. Then all of a sudden, like in just a blink, in like one frame, literally it's one frame. When I was doing a recording video, when I was going frame by frame, there's like this little kind of weird look. It's like in 2 frames. the Starfarer's gone, and but it's actually at your 6 o'clock position. It's right behind you. So if you kind of freak out, and you can actually kind of end up damaging the ship, or in a couple of the cases, it actually spun the ship when that happened, and that was funny, but it's something you have to look out for.
It spun it to the point where the pilot blacked out. Pulled a lot of G's coming off that boom arm. But
spun it like a top.
You're not gonna,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're not going to find a more engaging gameplay. It's really fun, and we have a great bunch of guys,
yes,
and they work real hard because we want to be those. We want to be about ahead of the curve. Yeah, we don't need it. We don't need it now, but we will. And all the training that we do, especially with fleet movement, it's that we want to be the best at. It's just that weird thing that we have. We want to be the best at what we do, and so we train at it all the time.
And make no mistake about it. At some point, when there's these mobile fleets going around, victories aren't necessarily going to always boil down to individual skills. Sometimes they will, of course. But sometimes victory is going to boil down to the fact that we can get we can put 12 fighters back on top of you before you can get your we can refuel our guys faster than you can refuel your guys.
Oh, absolutely.
And just overwhelm you because you just can't match kind of the back end, so the logistics. Many armies have lost because the other army was just better at logistics, even though you had a superior fighting force. You got there exhausted and hungry. So
yep. And when when the Crucible and the Legionnaire and things like that come in, we're going to be the fastest at repairing.
That's the goal. I mean, that's what we strive for. So, anyways, yeah, I appreciate you kind of humoring me. I know refueling. It's one of those things. We talk about the industrial stuff quite a bit, and I just enjoyed refueling. We've done it a few times. The fleet movement stuff is great. The trainings are great. It's just I would highly encourage anybody to get out there and and I know that there's not a lot of people actually actively doing refueling because you could pirate it and you have some costs involved in it. But if you happen to be you give yourself an opportunity to kind of to go refueling, or give yourself an opportunity to get refueled by a Starfarer, do it for sure. It's definitely worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I know we're kind of biased because we love that industrial gameplay, but it's probably some of the most fun you're going to have multiplayer by far right now. That isn't combat related. Well, it could be combat related. Actually, if you don't have a big org around you, it probably will be combat related.
Well, but in the moles now, anyways, right?
it'd still be pretty fun. You have that giant, that size 5 gun on the top, and
you do.
It can put some work in. So
anyways,
run a Gemini, so yeah.
Yeah, like I said. So the mole's still broken, by the way, everybody.
Yeah. Heads up, everyone. Mole's still broke.
We just it's kind of interesting how it's a lot of people. There are a lot of I do hear a lot of people kind of don't necessarily. Of course, it spans the gamut. A lot of solo players love the mole. A lot of people don't like the mole. There are a lot of people who don't think the mole has a reason. The mole actually is a very important tool for us, and it actually kind of plays a central part of our extraction team. We extract with that thing quite a bit, and so the fact that it can, if you're gonna break some part of the mole, break the mining part of it. With the extraction part, man, we needed that. So no, I'm just kidding. We are looking forward to. Hopefully, there are some bug. I think that there's a few things that need a little bit of love and attention, and I'm never gonna let I never want to let the industrial stream go by without saying, hey, we're. If anybody's out there is listening and you're a little bummed that your mole's not, we feel your pain.
We most definitely feel your pain. We haven't been able to work on our efficiencies for a couple weeks now. So, and we're hoping in a couple weeks it'll be fixed when this next patch rolls out, and that we can use the terminals in the refineries again. Because there are some, there's still some items that you can't buy anywhere else but those refinery terminals.
Absolutely.
So we're really excited for those to come back online, along with everything else.
Well,
But,
Zal,
we can't wait.
we can't. So, I just wanted to say once again, Zal and I kind of have this running joke that we can make a lot of something out of nothing sometimes when it comes to conversation. But
Hey, just get us rolling, man. Just wind us up.
Exactly. Just kind of put the key in and give her a twist back there, and we'll just kind of walk through it. But the reality is this is a super enjoyable thing to do, and it's not. I don't necessarily know that people. I know people enjoy this format because it's something they can just throw on their headphones if they're on a long drive. They want to, they're into Star Citizen, and they know we're into Star Citizen, and it does give people an opportunity to kind of, vicariously just kind of think about the things and theory. I think people are just as interested as we are in theory crafting. So I've really enjoyed tonight once again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, brother. I tell you, it really is.
All right. Well, I think we're going to call that one a wrap on the third episode of the Rock Runners Report. I'm not sure we did the intro, but we're going to do the outro. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope that you all have a lovely week, and I know that Zal and I are going to be working hard on some future content, and take care.
Everybody, subscribe, leave your comment, and we'll see you next week on the Rock Runners Report.